A brand isn't what it says or does, but how it makes its customers feel. It's a personal commitment from a brand to that person. They don't look at it and go, you're serving 1 million people. You're serving me.
Top leaders, meaningful conversation, actionable advice, bulldoze complacency, ignite inspiration, create impact. Produced by the Southwestern family of companies. This is the Action Catalyst.
Are you interested in advertising with the Action Catalyst? Our listeners could be hearing about your brand right here, right now. For details, shoot us an email at info@theactioncatalyst.com.
Today's guest is Kim Rozdeba, an expert and author with over 3 decades of experience in strategic planning, branding, and executing multi-million-dollar advertising and marketing campaigns, PR, and corporate communications. Currently, Kim is the Vice President of Communications, Public Affairs, Science, and Sustainability for Bayer. His first book, Branding Queens, which is about 20 incredible women who built global brands, is out right now.
Hi.
Hello.
So I'm in Nashville. Where are you?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Oh, beautiful. My folks went to the Winter Olympics there back in
88.
Yes. Did I read correctly that you carried the torch at those games?
I was an escort runner, yeah. So I was with it for 4 days. So there would be parts, so it got too dark and unsafe for having just regular people run with the torch. So we would have running groups, or we would run with it to make up some time. So if there was some time or some areas that were either difficult to run, steep hills, whatever, we would do that to keep the thing going. So yes, the part I really enjoyed was I've got probably a wry sense of humor. And every once in a while, the torch would go out because the fuel that was fueling it in the actual torch would run out, and then you'd have to refill it. And you'd see somebody and it would it's no longer lit. And I'm going, oh my God, what did you do? And they're going, I did nothing. And I go, well, we're going to have to go back to Greece now. What are we going to do? And I said, do you have a light? Do you have a match? But yes, there would be horror. But there is the eternal flame that is with it. And it is encapsulated, so it's protected, and that's where you light it from. So it comes from there all the time, so you don't take a match and light it. I actually was living in Toronto at the time, so I actually ran it in Ontario in minus 15 temperatures, but I didn't realize how incredible it was and an honor to actually be with the torch until my first evening that I was running in with the torchbearer. The torchbearer was beside me, and you run beside them just to make sure. Again, we would always sort of tell them, don't rush it. You take, enjoy this moment, because people would just want to, and we were tired because we've been running all day. It was to our advantage that they went slow. But when we came in, this older lady came running up to me and grabbed me and hugged me, and she said, "God bless you." And that was my introduction to that whole week, 4 days of running with it. The people, the incredible emotions, the feeling, you could feel the emotional in the air when you come into a venue where, again, we'd stop, we'd have some speeches. After we went out with a group of runners or torchbearers, we would take them back, and then we would do a debrief with them. And that debrief was quite emotional. And the team that went out, because we take a whole team out, and then they'd be in a caravan, and then we would, each one would have their turn, and then they'd go back into the caravan, and we'd go back with them, and then a new group would come out. They became instant friends. They shared, pictures and addresses, and yeah, it was very memorable, and as I said, very honored to have been able to have done that. Yeah, that's a long time ago. Now that I'm thinking about 35 years. But every one of them, like I see, the ones that happen all over the world, I'm captivated because, yeah, it is something that is truly amazing. And I had the opportunity to work with some Olympians, and these are incredible people. Incredible in the sense of they've put their whole life on hold for a sport. Obscure sports where there is no audience. There is nobody, cheering them on every day. So they do need to be able to have that endurance and that perseverance.
Oh, how cool. That's too cool. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so getting back to the topic. The first thing I want to ask is probably going to sound like a really juvenile question, but I think it would be important. I think what is so fascinating here is this idea of branding. Can you kind of walk me through the differences or similarity between branding, marketing, reputation? What is a brand?
I'm going to give you my definition of what a brand is to start. There's lots of different definitions out there. They talk about benefits, they talk about attributes, talk about tonality. But I've sort of taken a quote from Maya Angelou and I've kind of rewritten it. And it's, a brand isn't what it says or does, but how it makes its customers feel. So the end result of a brand is the feeling. So marketing can help with the feeling, but marketing is really talking about product attributes. It's about action, creating an action. You want somebody to do something, maybe have a promotion, maybe you have a sale, maybe it's a launch. But branding is about how people feel. Reputation is part of that. A lot of people say, the most important element is trust. And it's true. You look at your personal relationships, the foundation is trust. So you have to build that trust as well.
So this idea of a personal brand, talk to me about the importance of that, especially from a leadership perspective. Maybe you're not the CEO of a company, which you get what you're responsible for in terms of that brand. But what if, from a leadership perspective, I'm running a team, I'm a business owner, I get the brand part as it relates to the product, but what if in your responsibility, it's not so much about the product?
So there's two questions there, I think. One is if you're an employee, and two, if there's about you yourself. So let me talk about an employee first. From an employee's perspective, you could be an advocate of the brand. And the great thing about having advocates, i.e. your employees, people trust other people's opinion. So, if a person is out there talking about your product or your brand in a favorable way, that's a good thing. Ideally, these are your employees because they know your brand better than anybody else. On a personal level of building your own brand, I'm still not completely sure. There's a need to build a LinkedIn profile. There's a need to have a good resume. I'm not sure unless you're a consultant or if you're a leader and you are the face and voice of a brand that you need to have a personal brand. If you follow the metrics of a brand, if you want to dissect a brand, being a box of cereal is not a goal for me. That is a brand. A brand is about consistency and about controlling the messaging and all the attributes of that. And human beings are much bigger and better. I mean, we're emotional. We have many things to offer. And sometimes we change our minds, right? We do different things. We're multidimensional, not like a box. So there is parts of branding that we can utilize, absolutely. But outside of being, a voice for the brand and, being out there doing content, writing content, being out there doing podcasts, going the extra step to build your brand, I'm not sure everybody needs to do that.
Okay, but let's talk about if you are in leadership.
So as a leader of an organization or you're a consultant or you're a lawyer, a doctor, should you have a presence? Absolutely. Today, it becomes more important because people want to understand your why. It's about the why. It's about your purpose. It is about your promise. It's about, your values. And people want to know that. If they're going to be dealing with a company, they want to know the values of those people that are working in that company, in particular, the leader of it. So understanding that commitment, your personal commitment, it's not like you're morphing the brand's commitment because you've got your own personality attached to it. You have your own things that you are keenly interested in. Every time I see a new CEO in an organization, they bring different aspects to the brand. They take things and they may actually highlight things that are still within the brand, but it's of their own interests. So you have to have that passion attached to it. And you can see some of the leaders, I love the people that were passionate about certain topics because they live it and they breathe it. And you pick up things that you would never pick up before from that passion.
Okay. So talk to me about what you call the 5 C's.
All right. So the 5 C's, the first one is commitment. And it is about your purpose, your promise, that you're going to deliver every day. The second one is construct. And construct is the logo. It's the graphic design. It's the color palette. It's the tonality. It's the five senses. What is it going to feel like? What's it going to touch? Does it have a scent? What's the scent going to be? So it's all of those things that you can construct in making a brand. The third one is community. And a lot of people go, oh, I thought it was going to be customer. And customer is part of your community. But actually, your community is much bigger than just your customer. And we touched a little bit here already on about employees and the importance of employees as being advocates to your brand. So they're a key target audience in your community. But the other one, really, it's a really interesting one, is influencers. There's media influencers, there's podcast influencers, there's a whole number of people out there that can amplify your brand and give credibility to your brand. So that's your community. And then the next one is your content. And in content is your marketing. Marketing fits in there. It's your advertising. It is your public relations. A lot of brands, when they start out, they can't afford advertising. PR, it's free advertising. So that publicity, you can't pay for. I mean, it's if it's really good publicity, it's made some of the brands very famous very quickly. You get Oprah Winfrey to talk about your brand and you are set. But outside of that, it is about leaders. It is about your voice. It is about how do you present yourself in the industry as a whole. So it's not just advertising, and it's social media as well. And then the final one is probably the one that doesn't have as much sizzle, and that is consistency. And consistency is about how do you replicate every transaction, every touch point that you have with your consumer over and over and over and over the same way. But it's not just the same way, because you're trying to ratchet up, because once you've met expectation, the expectation goes up again. So you have to continually build a system, training, policies, governance, all of these things to make sure that what's being delivered is being delivered everywhere, every place, every time, the same way, and also improving that delivery every time. Oprah Winfrey said, she denied being a brand for many years until one day she discovered that one of the key elements of a brand is consistency. And she goes, well, yeah, I've always been consistent, so therefore I must be a brand.
Okay. One thing I have not ever heard before is a word that you use tied to commitment, and that is the word promise. And I think it is super interesting that when you talk about a commitment, you talk about a promise. I think a lot of folks, commitment, while there's usually a ton of sincerity around it, it almost feels, I'll say a promise feels personal.
Yes.
And to me, the fact that you would make this idea of a commitment be personal, as soon as you said that word, I go, yep, that's a difference. And I've heard that you have this interesting definition of the word accountability. Are those linked at all? Can you talk me through those two?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to my definition, which is it's a feeling. You have to get to that promise because it's a personal commitment from a brand to that person. They don't look at it and go, you're serving 1 million people. You're serving me. And my expectations are a certain level. And you build that over time because that consistency becomes really important because that promise is delivered. I mean, think of your personal situation. If somebody doesn't deliver on a promise, your trust level changes. Now, there's situations, that you'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and you'll do the same with a brand. If a brand falls down, and they do all the time, systems fall down, things don't work. Employees have a bad day, you have a bad experience. The question is, how do they fix it? That becomes the important element to all of it. That's where the accountability comes into, because everyone has to be accountable and delivering. And if you don't, somebody has to fix it and acknowledge that. And people are willing to give the benefit of the doubt if a brand doesn't deliver. But if it doesn't deliver over time, consistently, then they have to reevaluate. I mean, banks is a really interesting one because how many times do you change a bank? I've got 2 banks I deal with. One, my parents actually started and I had an account with it when I was a kid. And the other one I started from university because they were on the campus. I've gone to others, come and gone, didn't treat me as well as I thought, but it has to be really something really big to make that change.
correct me if I didn't hear you right, please. This accountability is how you fix it. That just acknowledgement and understanding that when you meet somebody's expectation, you got to continually go to the next. And it's not an aggressive go to the next level. It's just now you have a new foundation of what is expected. And you need to be always at or above. But if you do, because humans are running these companies, when you fall short, that's when accountability steps in, and how you respond to the falling short. Again, comes back to that trust factor, that feeling, that promise. You're bringing this to life.
St. Regis Hotel, high luxury hotel, beautiful hotel. They empower their employees who are accountable for that service delivery, every one of them. If there's a problem, they have, I believe it's about $2,000 at their discretion to solve a customer's issue. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to get approval. Every employee in that company can solve up to $2,000 a customer's problem. I think if I had $2,000, I think I could solve quite a few problems for customers.
That is awesome. When I originally heard the word brand, I thought about, my mom was raised in a time where brands, quite frankly, established the haves from the have-nots. If you brought if you could buy brand name things at the grocery store or, at the shopping center or wherever you did, that was it. So she was not raised as a have. And so as she grew older, that was very important to her to buy certain brands because it was the feeling. And I never understood why she was so loyal because, quite frankly, there are better products out there, but she is she will buy a certain name brand. I just can't get her to change. And I get that now. That's the feeling. And I think about the generation more that I'm in, we have very little brand loyalty, and it's a lot about price. However, as soon as that comes out of my mouth, I think about what was one of the biggest gifts this year for over the holidays. Almost every single female that I know, Stanley Cup, they're huge. And I was trying to think, what is the feeling that this Stanley Cup that I have now, what does it represent? And it is a feeling. It's almost a sense of being included. That is super interesting. So let's take that. So you have this idea around brand and the importance and what consists of it. How did you get to focus on females? Because as a non-female, and I'm making an assumption there, that surprises me a little bit. So talk me through that.
So I got to start with there's 20 entrepreneurial women in this book called Branding Queens. And they all, how we came up with the name was each one of them was referred somewhere in the media of queen of something. So it was kind of it was like a aha moment for me. I had several other titles before that, but it started repeating itself. I'm going, this is it. This is what the book should be called. But the first woman that this started the whole idea, was the champagne Veuve Clicquot.
Very familiar. Huge fan.
Parlez-vous français? So if you translate Veuve, it's widow in English. I didn't know that either. And I go, why would you put widow on a champagne bottle? I didn't know that it was actually a woman behind the champagne house. So it got me intrigued to go, okay, there's a woman behind this product. She started in 1810. Napoleon was raging in wars around France. Women were basically second-class citizens. How did this happen? So that was my journey. That was the start. And then I go, and why did she put widow? Well, you have to read the book to find out. So then I started saying, well, is there other women out there that I'm not aware of? There's quite a few that I am, and they're actually in the book. But are there others that I'm not aware? And I started digging. And the hard part was, as you go back in time, brands are a relatively new concept. They really came into their place back in the 1920s, 30s. Boomers, all the different brands that came up during the boom. 1940, there was a lot of brands that started. Prior to that, everything was just sort of a commodity. There was no printing presses and stuff. There was no way to communicate, personal, attachments to these things or where it came from. And that's kind of the intent, right? Is people want to know where is it safe? Is this a reputable organization? Am I going to die if I eat this? These are important things to know. But there were women out there. Bissell, the vacuum cleaner, In a lot of cases, they started with their husband. They were joint in the business because they intimately knew the business. Their husbands passed away fairly young, particularly in today's world. Did they have to continue with the company? In a lot of cases, they didn't. A lot of cases, they had like 4 or 5 kids, but they wanted to. And they saw the vision of what this brand was, and they actually built the brand. So I took situations here where they actually took whatever they had when they started, and then did they actually grow it? And did they actually make an iconic brand? And did they have enough evidence attached to it that they actually did get involved in building the brand themselves? So they just weren't an icon associated with the brand. And I found 20 women. The youngest is Sarah Blakely Spanks. Just recently stepped down as the CEO of her organization. I think she's got 3 or 4 kids. But these are fascinating stories. They're fascinating stories because in many of these cases, they had no experience of building a brand. They had no experience of building a product. And when you think of building a product, I'll go to Elizabeth Arden. She's a Canadian. She was born in Canada, and she moved to New York City, and she started working cosmetician, doing a lot of facials and stuff. And she came up with a product, a cream. She called it a jar of hope. So she already understood the why, what she was doing. And the why usually doesn't come right when you start. Apple didn't understand what they were doing at the beginning. It took them a while to figure out their why. And most products and most brands, this is the case. You don't really start with something big, colossal, you're going to change the world. You're just trying to make a product that's better than any other product. And it's, it's affordable, and you can actually put it a distribution center, and you can put a retail plan, you can get employees, all of these things. So the interesting aspect to all of this is all these women had to learn, and they were ferocious in their ability to learn different things because they came with just their passion. If anything, most of them came with is they knew that there was a problem, and they were the customer in a lot of cases.
I think, and I'm being a little bit assumptive here, but I think especially for women, and I'm taking this from what you said about Sarah Blakely stepping down, I think for women to really get into that idea of balancing work with family and so forth and so on, there has to be a lot of passion because there's a lot of sacrifice, quite frankly. Yeah. Even in today's society, as modern as we may be. But the other thing I heard, which I think is really good counsel for anybody who feels like they have a passion, and it really eliminates ego and pride and all these other things, is the ability to learn, the desire to learn. And I think those two things together, just looking at the list, some of the lists of the women, gosh, you would have thought, I don't know that you would necessarily go out and say they don't have pride or ego. I don't think you would say they were prideful or egotistical, but I don't know that without your direction here, we would naturally say that their ability and desire to learn was a standout or would be the advice. I think, most people would say, hey, advice, passion, get organized, rely on other people, don't try and do it all. But the way you broke that into just ability and desire to learn, it's so cool. Is there anything that you wanted to make sure we talked about or addressed in our time together?
I mean, don't be hard on yourself that you have to be a brand as a person. I took the challenge and said, I'm going to build a brand. It's a lot of work to build a personal brand. And I don't know if all of us need to be a personal brand. Sometimes I think this is a social media platform wanting all of us to build content, right? It's to keep all the social platforms full. And again, as I said, be yourself. Do you need to present particularly on LinkedIn, a professional viewpoint of yourself? Yes. But that shouldn't stop you from, having your cooking Instagram, your TikTok. I know quite a few people have TikToks for hobbies, and to have all these different things and not feel that you are deviating from your purpose or your goal, because that puts you in a box. That consistency puts you in a box because that's what a brand is. It's going to be consistent all the time. It's going to always act this way. And human beings, we can change, right? Sometimes if you see famous people who are brands and they change not for the good, that has a detriment to the brand. So we know that. But I don't want to be the king of England or the queen of England in the sense of, being confined of a personal way of being presented. That's not a life, I don't think.
No. This has been super insightful. Thank you so much for being here and for your time.
Stephanie, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Aw, thank you very much.
If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to subscribe. And to stay updated on everything that the Action Catalyst is up to, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Action Catalyst Podcast and on Twitter at Catalyst_Action. And as always, thanks for listening.